What's up, guys? So, I've posted a couple videos now of me speedrunning Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, and by far the most common comment on all those videos is some form of how did you do this? How did you teach yourself this? How do you remember everything and keep it all straight? So, I figured I would spin up a video series to basically show off all the different things that go into speedrunning each of these modules. And I'm trying to structure it so that hi phone. Trying to structure it so that anybody who no matter your experience level with the game, that anybody will have something to take away from this, from somebody who's just picking up the game for the first time all the way up to people who've been speedrunning the game and are trying to hit a world record. So let's jump right into it. The first module I have is the first module in the game, or at least in the manual, which is the simple wires. So first of all, if you've never played the game before, what does this module even look like? It gives you a bit of a picture up here in the top right. You've got some wires that run left to right. Let me pull one up in game. So the BOM I'm loaded into right now has all three of the different kinds of wire modules, so you can learn the differences between them. Alright, so this one right here is an example of the simple wires. You can see it's got all these wires are the same color, unlike complicated wires. Sometimes they'll have this sort of candy cane thing going on. And the wires also all run left to right. So another thing you need to know. So that's what simple wires look like. These other ones we'll deal with in later videos. And so that's what it looks like. The way you solve it is by cutting one of the wires. And there will be a whole set of steps in the manual. Where is it? There it is. There's a bunch of steps in the manual that'll tell you which of those wires to cut. So if I go back into the game, this is gonna be that one. Oh boy, am I gonna screw it up? Okay, that would have been awkward if I messed it up on my first take here. Cool. So that's what the module looks like, and that's how you solve it. And you can tell a module solved when that little green light comes on in the corner. Now, so if you're a casual player and you're with me so far, the first things to learn are what should you call out for your diffusers or for your people with the manual if you're the one diffusing the bomb, and if you're the one with the manual, what questions should you ask your player. So to start off with, the most important information is how many wires are there. You can see the whole page breaks down if you have 3, 4, 5, or 6 wires. That'll tell you how you need to go from there. After that, the only other information you might need is whether the last digit of the serial number is even or odd. You can see that shows up in here. If you have 4, 5, or 6 wires, those each have a condition based on the last digit of the serial number. So if you're the one who's playing the game, let me just pull up a bomb covered in them. This is a mod called, I think, Bomb Creator. It basically lets you just customize the free play bombs you get. So if you're, for casual players, when you're playing, the first thing you want to say is that you have simple wires, obviously, so they know what page to turn to. Then tell your experts the number of wires you have, and then read off the colors in order. So like if I pull this one up, I'd say, okay, I've got a simple wire with 6 wires. They go white, red, black, blue. And or simple wire, I've got 3 wires, red, black, blue. It doesn't matter where the spaces are or where you're missing wires. And when the manual gives instructions on which wire to cut, the wire is always numbered from the top down. So like right here, this is the first wire, this is the second wire, this is the third one. You don't have to worry about where the spaces are or which of these 6 connections actually contain the wires. So this will be cut a third wire. Alright, actually that is a perfect segue into what I was going to talk about for serious players. So some quick tips that I'd recommend for serious players is learn how to solve the 3 wire on your own, because that's actually really easy. If we go Let me put this away so it stops ticking. If we go back to the manual, so first of all, if there's no red wires, cut the second wire. That already covers most of the time when you have 3 wires. But if there is a red wire, then you can do a bit of logic on these last 3 steps. So the first thing you should notice that you're either going to cut the last wire. In 2 of these 3 cases, you'll cut the last wire. The last case, you cut the last blue wire. And so the only thing we really need to worry about is this case. If there's more than 1 blue wire, cut the last blue wire. But in order to have gotten here, there has to be at least 1 red wire, and there's only 3 wires total. So if there's more than 1 blue wire, that means it has to be 1 red and 2 blue wires. And then you're going to cut the last blue wire, but you're probably already going to cut the last wire anyhow. So what all of this boils down to is that if there's a red wire, you cut the last wire, or you cut the third wire. If there's not a red wire, you cut the second wire. The only exception to that is when the wires are blue, blue, red in that order. Because in that case, you'll have a red wire, so this case doesn't work. There's no white wire, so this case doesn't happen. And there's more than 1 blue wire, so you cut the last blue wire, which will not be the last wire because it goes blue, blue, red. So then you'll cut the second wire. But that is the one exception to the rule. So any other time when you have 3 wires, if you see a red, you cut the third one. If there's no red, you cut the second one. And that basically does it for the 3 wires. The other thing that's good to know is for 6 wires, these conditions are a lot more complicated because there's more wires to work with. And so I'm not going to go through why this is true. But if you have a red wire and a yellow wire, at least 1 red wire and at least 1 yellow wire, then you always cut the 4th wire out of 6. And again, if you can take the time to read through all these blocks or read through the 6-wire block and convince yourself that is actually true, or you can just take my word for it. So from there, let's talk about speedrunning, and now I'll get back into the game because at this point, for simple wires, you shouldn't really be touching the manual at all if you're trying to speedrun. So let's pull the manual back up. Just kidding, I just looked at my notes. So one important thing to note, because at this point you're going to start memorizing the manual, right, if you try to speedrun. So one important thing to notice between the 5-wire and the 6 wires is that these 2 conditions, or these 2 blocks of conditions, are structured almost the exact same as each other. They start with some weird condition that checks the serial number. Okay, cut me some slack here. But then the rest of it is almost word for word exactly the same. If there's exactly 1 blank wire and there's more than 1 blank wire, cut the first wire. If there's exactly 1 blank wire, there's more than 1 blank wire, cut the 4th wire. And then otherwise, if there are no black wires, cut the second wire. Otherwise, if there are no red wires, cut the last wire. So the last 3 instruction sets are all the same, just the colors are changed and the positions are changed. So that makes the 5 and 6-wire cases pretty easy to remember, because you have all the same rules, you just have to switch which colors are for 5 and which ones are for 6. Which makes the 4-wire case actually the hardest out of all of them, because again, the 3 wires we talked about earlier, if there's a red, you cut 3, if there's not, you cut 2. So if the 4 wires is the only one I actually make a mnemonic for, and this will be the first of many times I make this disclaimer. If you want to speedrun the game, I do not recommend you listen to my mnemonics, because in my opinion, in my experience, it's a lot easier to remember mnemonics that you come up with on your own than to remember whatever some dude on the internet told you to do. And it doesn't apply here, but I will also say this caveat as you're making your own mnemonics. Obviously, try to make them as memorable as possible, which for me, maybe I'm just a bad person, but generally means to make them as vulgar as possible. That doesn't apply here. My mnemonic for this one is pretty safe for work. But in the future, I will generally not be sharing my mnemonics, partially because, again, it's easier to remember if you come with on your own, and partially because they'd probably just straight up get my channel deleted, some of them. So figure out your own. I will share my own when I can. Like for the 4 wires, I'll share my mnemonic here in a second after all this massive disclaimer. But I want to establish that if you want to get into speedrunning this game, I recommend that you skip the mnemonics the mnemonic that I'm about to give and come up with your own. Or I mean, listen to mine and then come up with your own spin-off variation of it. Whatever floats your boat, I guess. But I find that creating it yourself makes it more memorable. So anyway, the way I remember for 4 wires is this first line is odd red, because obviously the last digit of the serial number has to be odd, and there's more than one red wire, which is a oddly large number of red wires. Again, it doesn't have to make sense, it has to be memorable. So we have odd red, and then yellow seg, because the yellow wire is at the back. It's not that vulgar. It's okay. So yellow seg, because the last wire is at the back, and there's no red wires. That doesn't really fit into the mnemonic. I just have to remember that on top of it. So you cut the first wire. So the whole mnemonic goes odd red, yellow seg, 1 blue, yell last 2. If you can follow that. So odd red was that first line. Yellow seg is last wire's yellow and there's no red wires. And then the 1 applies both to you cut the first wire and also 1 blue wire, you cut the first wire. So that 1 sort of does double duty in both lines. So that's odd red, yellow seg, 1 blue, and then yell last, combination of yellow, more than 1 yellow, and last, and then 2, cut the second wire. So odd red, yellow seg, 1 blue, yell last, 2 is how that all breaks down. At least that, again, that's the way I remember it. I recommend you come up with your own. So lastly, I want to talk about the really high level strategies or sort of micro optimizations you can make on top of all of the actual knowing how to do the module yourself. The sort of going the extra mile to do the stuff it takes to be able to do a world record run. And I'll admit, I'm pretty out of practice with this game right now. My my current world record's like 2 years old at this point or something, and I haven't played the game that much since then. So this might be a little rusty, and I might blow myself up here, which will be great. But let's see how it goes. So the first thing to talk about, this is actually a good example of it, is just trying to guess the wire, because when you have 4, 5, or 6, there's a chance that you get the condition where you have to check the serial digit number, or the last digit of the serial number. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. That was just a misclick. Anyway, so when you're trying to speedrun, a lot of times you don't want to spend the time flailing the bomb around to find the serial number, then turn your head on the side and read it and everything. Because if you can figure out which of 2 wires it has to be, and you have strikes to burn, which you do at the start of the game, then it makes sense to just cut both wires. So like in this case, there's no yellow wire, so if the last digit of the serial number is odd, you would cut the 3rd wire, because we have 6 wires. But if the last digit of the serial number is even, then we're going to cut the 4th wire, because we have a red wire. So I didn't pay attention when I spun the bomb around. I don't know which digit the serial number is, but I know it has to be one of these 2. So I'll just guess it's 3, and if it's not, then it's 4. That was a very lengthy explanation of that concept. In practice, you just cut both wires, and you cut 1 wire. If it's wrong, you cut the 2nd wire, and you move on with your day. This one, that's not actually a guess, because again, we have a red and a yellow, so it has to be 4th. I might run out of time here, actually, but we've got some 4s that will be good to demonstrate this. So the first one is odd red. So we have 2 reds, but since this failed, we know that, or I guessed the 3rd wire down here, which would be right if the serial digit was odd, but it was wrong, so the serial digit has to be even. So we don't have odd red. Then we go to yellow seg, but the last one's not yellow. So we'd have 1 blue, which we don't. Yell last doesn't work, so it's 2. And out of time. So obviously that's in itself that was not a great speedrun, but hopefully that's demonstrating some of the techniques that would go into actually speedrunning these modules. Also, so this could be 1 or 4. Alright, that's good. Copy that. This feels right. So that's what actually speedrunning it might look like if I just shut up and play the game for a second. So let's see. Oh yeah, one other thing that's important to note. When I speedrun this game, I have the brightness and contrast on my monitor all basically jacked up to max so that I can actually see the bomb before the lights turn on. That's another thing that people have asked about. And since those are settings on my monitor, they're not going to come through in the recording. So it might look like I'm just staring at a black screen and still making correct decisions. But I promise if you turn your brightness up enough, you can see the bomb before the lights come on. All right. The the only other thing I have listed on here, I'm not even sure if I should mention because it's such a minor thing, but since the wires point left to right, it is slightly easier to do the modules left to right because then the wires aren't going to shift as you're moving across. So like if I choke, I mean you can see when I cut this last wire on the right side, I basically just double clicked on it because there's no limit on how quickly you can give the game inputs. So it'll keep up with you as fast as you try to click. So since the wires go left to right, if you also work left to right, you don't have to worry about missing them as you go across. And that's especially true in this case when both of them were 4 right next to each other. It's also important to notice the hitbox of the wires. It's basically just a rectangle. It's not exactly. It does sort of match the shape of the wires, but it's also not quite the highlighted shape it gives you either. So for the most part, you basically just want to stay in this rectangle, which again makes it easier as you're working across to just cut. Like if all of them were the 4th wire, that'd be extra easy. But going from this 4th wire straight to cutting this 4th wire was very slightly faster because I was working left to right instead of top to bottom. But again, that's such a minor thing that it's not really worth pointing out. Alright, so here's another example. This, like before, so there's no yellow wire. So if the last serial digit is odd, I'd cut the 3rd wire. If it's even, I'll cut the 4th wire because there's red. And I don't know which one it is, so I'll just guess. I guessed wrong. I'll cut the other one. And then I'll do that so I don't blow up this time. Alright, so that's pretty much all I have to say about this particular module. Let me just see how many of these I can go. So if I enable the back face, that lets me go add 6 modules for a total of 11. Let me just see how quickly I can bust out 11. I am a little bit out of practice, so this could go horribly wrong. Okay, so serial digits even. That's good to know. Oh, because there's 2 yellow wires, so it's actually 6. 2, that's 4, that's 4. 3, 4, 2, 6, 4. Alright, so that was 17 seconds for 11 of them. That's not bad. Not bad. That's pretty good, actually. Cool. Alright, so this is hopefully the first of many videos in this vein. I want to go through and do one of these for every module in the game. I'll probably combine all the needies into one because that would be pretty redundant. There's not much to talk about with most of those guys. And then I'll also try and do some general ones about how to multitask, maybe just how to memorize the manual in general. But yeah, hopefully this is the first of many videos in this series. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, all the stuff that all the YouTubers tell you to do at the end of every video. Do that shit. Thanks. Love you. Bye.